Bitcoin, is it a hero that's going to zero, or is it a zero going to hero? That's the question to ponder on today's episode of the NZ Everyday Investor. I'm catching up with Christian Keroles from Bitcoin Magazine today. Now, about 2 years ago, for background, I caught up on the show with a really smart guest who will remain anonymous here. I'm not going to give away who he is. But he confidently told me to exit out of Bitcoin when its price was around 7,000 US or so, I think it was. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's going to zero. Get your money out now. Intelligent guy, but such a great example, I guess, of how intelligence on its own is not always our best advisor. So a couple of things now before we start on today's discussion. I want to mention this thing called the Lindy Effect. But what the Lindy Effect effectively means is that the longer something has been around for, the longer it's likely going to be around. Bitcoin didn't die after 2007, which was one of three significant price run-ups since its inception just over a decade ago. It lost a lot of value, don't get me wrong, but it stuck around. Many wrote it off and potentially checked out prematurely. Before then and since then, there have been hacks in exchanges, there's been negative connections to criminal activity, there's been accusations of it being a scam. All of these things have been aimed at this scarce digital asset living on a blockchain, which actually is technically quite pure. The problems with Bitcoin appear to me at least to be problems with structures and problems with imperfect people who operate around the periphery. And you're going to get that no matter where you go. But the problem doesn't actually exist with the asset itself. So is Bitcoin the story of a hero that went to zero, or maybe it will go to zero? It hasn't happened yet. And if the Lindy effect can be relied on, the longer it sticks around, the likelihood of it going to zero decreases over time. So that leaves really only one other option apart from it staying the same, which won't happen. And that's Bitcoin going from zero to hero. If it goes to zero, you lose all your money. But that's a finite result. On the other hand, the upside is infinite. Today's show is going to be slightly biased, of course, as there's a couple of guys with skin in the game talking Bitcoin up. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we're only going to show you one side here. But try to discredit the conversation today. And by all means, leave a comment to explain to me why Bitcoin is still a scam. The question I'd ask you either way, though, is this. Will the reason you're currently using today to give Bitcoin a miss give you the comfort that you need tomorrow once all is said and done? Now, a serious warning here, of course. This episode contains a discussion on a highly speculative alternative asset. Please do your own due diligence thoroughly and independently before getting into or out of investments like this. Before we make a start, a quick shout out to our partner, Hatch. Hatch makes it super easy to get your money to work for you by investing in share markets. In the description is a link that you can follow to get a free $20 credit for the first $100 that you deposit into a brand new Hatch account. Thanks again, Hatch. And at the end of the show today, I'm also going to give you some details on how you can purchase Bitcoin in New Zealand, if that's for you. Let's make a start. Cool. Welcome to the NZ Everyday Investor podcast. My name is Darcy Angaro, and today I'm very fortunate to be in the presence of Christian Keroles, or CK. How are you, Christian?
Darcy, an honor to be on the podcast. I'm fantastic.
Fantastic. Tell us where you are right now.
So I am in sunny Palo Alto, California, actually quite close to Stanford's campus. And yeah, I'm a California native of the US, born and raised.
Cool. Tell me a little bit about what's actually going on right now. I'm thinking in my head, just based on the media snippets that I get, there's fires, there's lockdowns, there's all sorts of stuff going on. What does it feel like just to be an everyday, Joe Public right now over there?
Yeah, so I mean, there's fires. I went through 6 weeks of fires, and it ended about 2 weeks ago. So that was quite miserable. Couldn't go outside really. There's a couple of days where the sky was literally orange, and it just had a very ominous and spooky feeling. So that was very uncomfortable. In terms of the lockdown, things are easing up, but things are definitely still pretty restricted. People are wearing masks. People are not eating indoors still. Gyms are kind of on and off depending on where in the country you are. So life is not very comfortable in America right now. There's a lot of political upheaval. And I wish it was less political, to be honest. I feel like the rest of the world dealing with coronavirus was a lot less political, and I think that's preferable, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay, so with that said, now just for our audience, can you just explain how you kind of fit into specifically into the Bitcoin world? Because as you can tell by the poster in the background there in your room, we're talking about Bitcoin today, and
Yes.
I wanted to start pretty shallow because I think no matter how many times I've tried to cover this on the show, it always feels like we still need to go back to the basics and then build from that, no matter who I talk to, because it's just so otherworldly, isn't it? Like it really does feel like something that's come down from the gods. You know, Zeus has given it, and you this gift, this Satoshi Sakamoto. No, what's his name?
Satoshi Nakamoto.
I always prefer to call him Natoshi, but no, it's Satoshi Nakamoto.
You can call him Satoshi Sakamoto. I'm sure he's okay with that.
He's not going to complain, is he? So this fictional character is given us this gift of Bitcoin, this tool to actually have this new form of digital gold. And tell us how you fit into that Bitcoin universe.
So I'll tell my Bitcoin story and then talk about what I currently do for Bitcoin Magazine, which is a Bitcoin exclusively focused media company. So my name's CK. I'm on Twitter at CK_Snarks. I do a ton of different podcasts ranging from Bitcoin and crypto podcasts to Fed and macro podcasts. And I kind of stumbled into this world of Bitcoin during the 2017 crypto mania. So I don't know if many of you have been paying attention or were paying attention to Bitcoin and crypto, but in 2017, like grandmas were buying crypto and Bitcoin. And it was, Bitcoin hit all-time highs at $20,000. I think Ethereum hit $1,000, and anything that had a ticker was going to the moon if it was a cryptocurrency. And obviously that mania died down and deflated in pretty spectacular fashion, but it had caught my attention. And at that moment, like, a lot of people hear the word Bitcoin, but they never pay attention to it. They never look into it. They never try to study what it is. And the first moment in October of 2017 where I said, hey, I'm going to download a podcast and I'm going to spend some time to learn about Bitcoin, I was immediately captivated. I immediately understood that this was a revolution and that we were very, very early still. Kind of a combination of just excitement for being early, as well as kind of understanding of how important money is in the world and how a revolution in money is going to change everything. It just captured my imagination. By mid 2018, I was working full time for Bitcoin Magazine and BTC Inc. Been full time crypto for quite a while now. And in terms of what I do now, I am the editor for multimedia content for Bitcoin Magazine. We are one of the oldest Bitcoin focused publications. We are actually started by Vitalik Buterin, who is the founder of Ethereum. Before founding Ethereum, he founded Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin Magazine was later purchased by David Bailey, who still operates it. And here I am, the multimedia editor. So I do a ton of podcasts, do a ton of live streams, weekly content, always going down at Bitcoin Magazine on Twitter, Bitcoin Magazine on YouTube. And yeah, it's always a good time just talking Bitcoin all the time.
It must be nice knowing that that your whole universe is that well, not your whole universe. Your whole world is the Bitcoin universe. So you're in it all the time, and you're probably quite sensitive to things that are changing. You can probably spot trends, movements forward and backwards. Do you often kind of get the sense that regular people don't quite get it? It's still not getting past that membrane and getting into the minds and the consciousness of everyday investors. Do you kind of still sense that, or do you think it's kind of starting to make a move towards reaching the consciousness of the everyday person?
Bitcoin now is 11 years old. It will be 12 years old in January. So it's closer to 12 than it is 11. And there's this idea, it's called Lindy Effect. So Lindy Effect means the longer something has been around, the longer we can expect it to be around. If something has been around for 10 years, we can reasonably expect it to be around for another 10 years. Something's been around for 100 years. Like it shows that when something is established, stays established. So in terms of Bitcoin, the fact that it's no longer 1 year old, no longer 2 years old, but now 12 years old, and people have heard about it for a long time. People have been born with Bitcoin existing around them at all times. If you're 12 years old, you've never lived in a world without Bitcoin. It's gaining this Lindy, and it's gaining this brand name. I think Bitcoin is already a brand name. Like, who doesn't, like, even if you don't know what Bitcoin is, you've heard of it, you know? So like Bitcoin's on that level already in terms of the human language of, you know, English and other languages. So it's in rap music. So I really do think that it is breaking a barrier. On top of just Lindy and being around for a long time and being something that people are used to, Bitcoin's use case as a digital gold, as an uncorruptible, uncensorable form of digital money is proving itself. If you're talking about California, here's something that happened to Californian landlords. They cannot evict someone for the foreseeable future until the governor decides to change it because of COVID, right? So all of a sudden you have this business, this real estate business. It's going to give you cash flow. You have, you know, some reasonable control, you know, of your tenants, because obviously you need to, like, if you have a bad tenant or someone who's not paying, you need to be able to evict them, right? Otherwise, like, your business kind of goes kaput. Like, a lot of landlords are living, you know, rent to rent, in terms of like they use the rent to pay the mortgage and be able to continue to afford that property. So that really hurts that, you know, business, you know, real estate as a store of value and a business model. Like, laws like that hurt it. And when you can't invest in different things and things start getting kind of, you know, made difficult to be a part of a business or investment, you need to start looking for alternatives. And never have, you know, investments been more suspect than today, and never has an alternative been more appealing. And I have an unfortunate feeling that that trend is going to continue as a global trend. And something like Bitcoin, as a completely sovereign, completely separate from any nation state investment vehicle, currency, value measure system, is just going to become more and more relevant.
And it feels kind of almost like, if I was just to sort of kind of tune into that bandwidth there, like it, or if I was to tune into that frequency, sorry, it kind of feels like the importance of it being censorship resistant, the importance of it being decentralized, is now becoming quite apparent, isn't it? Because as we see this, like, a further move from the state to, rightly or wrongly, interfere or get involved with our money system and our lives, therefore, by default, there needs to be an alternative. But there hasn't really been an alternative. Like, you know, sure, you could just get gold and silver coins and just have your own kind of sort of peer-to-peer bartering system, if you like. But really, in the new world, you know, you need to have digital money for the digital world. And so it's quite strange, isn't it?
You can't put gold on Visa, but you can
No.
put Bitcoin on Visa. All they have to do is decide. There's already debit cards that support Bitcoin. So like, you need something that's purely digital to work in the digital world, like you indicated. 100%.
That's right. Hashtag drop gold, right? So
I mean, I like gold. I think there's a place for gold. I own gold ETFs, and I own gold bars as well as Bitcoin. But like, Bitcoin is 100 to 1,000 times better than gold. And I'm sorry to gold investors, but in almost, like, why buy gold and then measure why buy Bitcoin, and Bitcoin just outperforms in almost every single category.
Correct. Like, I think a lot of investors in New Zealand, one of the most popular ETFs that I'm aware of in New Zealand is the gold. I think it's a Spider Gold ETF.
I own that.
Yeah, and you know, but that's like, I think, third or fourth most popular on some of the online trading platforms. And I suspect the reason why it's quite popular at the moment is because people naturally know that this gold thing exists as an alternative investment, potentially with this notion that it's not correlated positively to, you know, the S&P 500, for example. So it's a hedge, perhaps, but it's still in the financial realm. It's still part of a centralized system, which converts the value of that back into fiat currency, or the regular dollars that you and I use. Whereas Bitcoin is outside of, it's completely external to what we know. And I guess that's probably part of it, right? Is people don't know how it works, therefore they shy away from it. So maybe start by telling me what, Bitcoin, not Bitcoin 101, but blockchain 101, just to sort of really start there. What is a blockchain?
Effectively, what a blockchain is a blockchain is a distributed ledger, right? So what is a distributed ledger? So for example, you may have an account with your local bank, and that local bank has an internal ledger where they are essentially keeping track of who owns what within the bank system, right? So what Bitcoin and what blockchains do is they say, hey, we're going to take that proprietary closed black box ledger that your bank has, and we're going to open it to the public, and we're going to create a ledger that anyone can download and validate and keep track of on their own, right? And there are actually cell phones that can download the entire Bitcoin blockchain and continuously keep up with the Bitcoin blockchain and stay up to date with the Bitcoin blockchain over time, right? So that is called a node. So if you have a copy and are keeping that copy up to date with the blockchain as it is updated over time, that is called owning a node. And that is really what is revolutionary about Bitcoin, right? So what makes gold a good store of value and uncorruptible is that only nature can make gold, and therefore it cannot be messed with, right? So Bitcoin does this with a ledger that everyone gets to have. It's called the blockchain. So the blockchain is really at the core of how Bitcoin enables a digital scarce thing to exist. And that digital scarce thing is ledger entries on a shared ledger that anyone can download and validate and verify whether or not those ledger entries are true or not. And there are very specific rules to how a ledger entry can be changed or moved around that are completely uncorruptible. And that is enforced through cryptography, as well as a process called mining, which we can or cannot get into depending on where you want to take this. But long story short is, without even having to understand mining, you can understand, because of the cryptographic guarantees that are used, that come with the cryptography that Bitcoin uses, that this distributed ledger is uncorruptible.
So really, the blockchain here that Bitcoin is sitting on, I guess to a certain extent, it's the carrier of this idea, this thing from Satoshi Nakamoto. It's actually, it could be called anything really. It doesn't have to be called Bitcoin, but the fact that it is Bitcoin is the first real, it's the first real digital currency that actually properly works, that has been set free in the wild, and it is finite, much like gold is. I think it's something like 3 Olympic-size swimming pools is how much gold there is, and yeah, you can mine. So the supply is increasing gradually, and
that's the assumption, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and there's a lot of
so that's a key difference between Bitcoin. And again, I think gold is fantastic, but Bitcoin, because it's think of gold is a real commodity, Bitcoin's a synthetic commodity, so it's actually perfectly finite, so a Bitcoin block is mined, which means that the ledger is updated globally every single 10 minutes. So what that means is that Bitcoins are moved around on the ledger, but that means also that every single node on the network, which is at this point hundreds of thousands, audits the entire supply every single 10 minutes in that process. So gold, how often does the entire gold supply get audited?
Never, perhaps?
It never gets audited. It's impossible to audit the entire gold supply.
Yeah, and there's a lot of theories around that as well, right? There's probably far more paper gold in existence than physical gold that, in theory, backs up that paper, right?
There's no real way to back it up, but that's a key way. I think Bitcoin if Bitcoin can become a global reserve standard, it's 1,000 times better than gold. It's audited the entire supply every single 10 minutes.
And it's audited without actually finding fault. It's, of course, we've heard of these hacks, and we've heard of exchanges coming down, all that sort of stuff, and people losing their keys. But that's actually a different issue. The core issue is that the network itself self-validates, and it kind of authenticates its finite supply every 10 minutes. So you can be assured that nobody is behind the scenes like a puppet master manipulating the supply, right?
So here's something interesting. Bitcoin and a few other cryptocurrencies are actually decentralized and are actually uncorruptible. There are a lot of phony cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of derogatory terms that are used for them, but an easy one is called an altcoin. But a lot of these altcoins are called centralized. And there's a great example of what's the difference between a decentralized and uncorruptible cryptocurrency and a centralized and manipulatable cryptocurrency.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, there was an exchange called KuCoin that got hacked, and it was actually a massive, massive hack, and they lost a ton of cryptocurrency, right? So this was not Bitcoin getting hacked. This is the exchange getting hacked. So I'm sure the listeners have heard of like the Equifax hack, data breach in the United States. So massive bureau that holds a lot of sensitive information from Americans got hacked, and that valuable information got leaked. In Bitcoin or cryptocurrency exchanges, the information is literally the money. So when you lose that information, you don't have your own copy. You know, those keys, that Bitcoin is gone, right? That it got moved on the ledger to a different spot that exchange no longer has control of. They no longer cryptographically have access to it. So Bitcoin is so incorruptible that it actually allows for these hacks of bad exchanges to happen, right? That's how uncorruptible the ledger is. So when KuCoin got hacked, they stole a lot of altcoins, fake cryptocurrencies, centralized cryptocurrencies, and then they stole a lot of Bitcoin. So the altcoins, all of those teams that run those coins, all froze the coins immediately, right? They said, "Oh, those stolen coins aren't valid anymore. KuCoin, here's your new minted version of the coins." But the Bitcoin, the Ethereum, the handful of other coins that, you know, either the team didn't want to interfere or were actually uncorruptible, you know, they're now owned by the hackers.
Right. And that's a key thing, right? Because its greatest strength is potentially its greatest weakness in that sense, right?
I wouldn't say it's a weakness. I would say it exposes weaknesses in other systems. We have a lot of really crappy computer systems that are not secure at all. And now that Bitcoin exists, that is an incentive to harden our security. Because if you hold Bitcoin, you can get it stolen if your digital security isn't hardened. And if your security isn't hardened, you know, you could be attacked and bribed for Bitcoin. So,
and that's the thing that I think it's like in any realm, right? Like if you have a group of friends and one of them is on a paleo diet, you all of a sudden feel like you're the Muppet, right? And you're really, really unhealthy because somebody who is far more pure than you has entered the room, right? And I guess that's what Bitcoin does, is it exposes the weakness in the traditional financial system and the way we do things. It's that pure is effectively what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Pure is a great word. Bitcoin is extremely pure.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
And that's why I think guys like, you know, you mentioned earlier, you are a big fan of the Real Vision content. So Raoul Pal, a very prominent commentator in the macro space, has really endorsed Bitcoin and crypto for that reason. He sees it as the entire system is corrupt. All of these central banks are corrupt, and they're, you know, manipulating their currencies to get whatever, you know, ends that they determine they need to end based on their mandate. And, you know, they really plow over their people, and they plow over markets. And he sees this innovation that is Bitcoin, this pure, uncorruptible digital money, as potentially being very valuable and very useful in the world. And I tend to agree with him.
Do you see Bitcoin as a hedge? Because it seems, especially this year, it does kind of feel like it kind of tanked along with everything else. Would you say that Bitcoin is a hedge, or is it really just like every other asset that you own? It's subject to sentiment in the market.
So I think the long game is that there's no price of Bitcoin and everything is priced in Bitcoin, but that may sound very, very crazy to most people listening to this. So I would say if you don't believe that, then Bitcoin's probably not a hedge for you today, right? You have to like understand Bitcoin and believe that for Bitcoin to be a hedge today. Bitcoin today, I think Lynn Alden on my podcast. So Lynn Alden is a fantastic macro commentator. She was on my podcast, FedWatch. And I asked her, what is Bitcoin's role in the portfolio today? And she said that Bitcoin is more akin to silver than anything else, which actually makes a ton of sense. And I'll break down to why that makes sense. It's kind of like a supercharged gold. it is ultimately uncorrelated. And there's a statistic called a Sharpe ratio. So if you just add 1% Bitcoin to your portfolio, it improves your Sharpe ratio significantly. Anthony Pompliano talks about that a lot. But it's a great way to add uncorrelation to your portfolio. Recently, Bitcoin has been trading very much like a tech stock, like an American tech stock, and has been very correlated with the NASDAQ. But I would say that's just because of the type of people that are currently trading both of those asset classes right now. Bitcoin and those asset classes appeal to the same people, and those people are all actively trading. I think speculation in the markets from American, young American investors is at all-time highs right now. So that would make sense to me. But that doesn't, that's not inherent to Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin, again, is just a neutral distributed ledger across the globe with hundreds of thousands of nodes. Yeah,
it is what it is, and it's not going to bow to what the sentiment is necessarily in the long term. So what you're saying is that maybe right now it appears highly correlated to, say, the NASDAQ, but given a long enough horizon, we're probably going to see that hedging property materialize a lot more. And I guess when that happens, kind of much like gold investors have this kind of cognitive dissonance around the whole idea that, well, I want my holding of gold to go to the moon, but at the same time, I don't want all the upheaval that will go with it. And do you think with Bitcoin in particular that we've got a lot more pain, like the pains of childbirth in a sense, to go through before we get to this place where, our tech stocks are denominated in Bitcoin? Do you think that's kind of what needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I've not given birth, but I don't think anyone in the world has seen an asset monetized in real time. Gold monetized over centuries, over generations. Countries died by the silver standard. So there's a long history of monetization in gold. So we've never seen a monetization event, and I'm sure there's a lot of skeptics who'd say you're a crazy man, and Bitcoin's never gonna monetize in real time to a global reserve asset. I think if Bitcoin does become that, the world will have changed a lot, tremendously. If that would have happened, the centers of power in globally are going to be very, very much changed. The US dollar standard, it may be global, but it truly is still national to the US. It forces value into the dollar and into the dollar system. And that's why you see, such a concentration of value in the US equity markets and the financialization that's kind of stemmed from New York. So it's hard to tell, man. Asking those kind of questions, it's what changes if everything you assumed about the world is different? And how are we going to get there? I have absolutely no idea.
I think we're all in the same boat, right? But it's we think linearly, don't we? We think in incremental rates of change. But as we've seen recently, we're on an exponential curve. And even people like yourself who are well and truly into this space, I'm going to suggest that even you have no idea how fast things are going to change, right? Things can change a lot quicker than any of us can imagine.
Humans are really bad at understanding exponentials. Humans can't even think second order effects naturally. So let alone exponentials is something that is just growing, multiplies on itself. It's just I can't even explain it because that's how hard it is to fathom, what that truly means.
Yeah, I get it. So let's bring it back down to, I guess, the everyday person now, and let's speak to the Robinhood investors, or the online retail investors that are new to the space right now. Do you think that the fervor that they've brought into the market, the stocks only go up kind of mentality, do you think that will translate into, say, Bitcoin or crypto? Do you think that they'll start to figure out, hang on, well, if we can all pile into Hertz or airlines right after COVID, then maybe we could all pile into Bitcoin as well, which is actually significantly better. Do you see that happening?
Oh, yeah. Bitcoin is globally permissionless, right? So in order to get access to Apple stocks, in order to get access to a lot of these things, you need to have special privileges, either being in the United States or having some sort of special bank or access. If you're not in the United States, it's difficult to get access to these things. You can get access to Bitcoin derivatives, altcoins, massive amounts of leverage. All of that stuff is accessible in a completely permissionless manner because of these cryptocurrencies. So it's inevitable that as money printer grow burr and people tend to speculate more on other things, that they're gonna gravitate towards cryptocurrencies. Primarily because of the permissionless nature.
Yeah, it's easily accessible, and I guess the world's unbanked now have an option, whereas before they're just too difficult, right?
The unbanked people of the world have been unbanked because it's been unprofitable to bank them. They've been unbanked by choice. It's been a business decision. So Bitcoin will bank you no matter what. It just exists, and you can use it if you have access to a device that can store a Bitcoin key and have access to the internet. Boom, you're good to go.
How can and not specific to the US or New Zealand, but obviously there's a way to own Bitcoin. How would you recommend like a first-time Bitcoin investor to get involved?
The first thing that you should do if you are in any way interested in allocating it all to Bitcoin is to take a small sum of money that you won't care about at all and find a way to purchase Bitcoin. There's a lot of people who have strong opinions on how you should purchase Bitcoin, but it's very easy at this point, and there's a lot of different avenues. So a quick Google search with how to buy Bitcoin, name of your country, should lead you to a lot of different options. But yeah, I think the first thing you should do is get a small amount of skin in the game. Once you have a small amount of skin in the game, you will be incentivized to learn about it as price goes up or down or whatever. I suspect that prices are going up, and I have my own reasons to believe that. But that's definitely not investment advice. But with that skin in the game, you're going to be led down an educational rabbit hole. And if you buy that Bitcoin on an exchange, there's a lot of startups. There's a lot of even banks that offer ability to buy Bitcoin depending on where in the world you are. If you are competent enough and have education to hold it yourself, you can do it similar to like gold, right? You could put that, you can have that gold in a custodian, or you can have that gold under your bed. But in terms of Bitcoin, it's way, way easier to custody than gold, especially once you have a certain level of core competency and understanding. And yeah, in order to get full access to Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies, uncensorable nature, is you have to hold it yourself.
One of the things I do is actually just move it from one wallet to another, just to make sure I remember the process that I follow and the steps that I set up in terms of securing everything. And it seems like it's just kind of those basics. When you're your own bank, you kind of have to act like a bank and set up just good behavior around that, good sort of procedures that you go through. No matter what you're feeling, you kind of have to follow these procedures, because as soon as you lose those keys, your coins, they're gone.
Yeah, I mean, and so just to kind of add to that, there's a famous line in a Spider-Man movie: with great power comes great responsibility. So Bitcoin gives you great power, right? If you just have your Aussie dollars, or what's the New Zealand currency?
Yeah, the New Zealand dollar, the Kiwi.
So if you have the Kiwi inside your bank account, that bank honestly has complete right to tell you what you can and cannot use your money on, and they can change their policy. That's a fact. So if you want the power to have internet money that doesn't have those kind of controls on them, those kind of supervisions on them, you also have to accept the responsibility of messing up, of needing a take back. And, it might not be for everyone right now, but that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is programmable. The Aussie dollar, the Kiwi, it can only live as like a piece of paper or in this permissioned guarded universe. Bitcoin can do any of it. Like there's physical Bitcoins, and don't ask me how that goes, but it's cryptographically possible. There are there's Bitcoin bank accounts like the one that you mentioned, where it can be Bitcoin, but obviously it doesn't have all of its properties. Or you can take self custody, on your cell phone or on a specialized cold storage device that has special cryptographic security measures that are built into it to help you protect your Bitcoin. But Bitcoin actually gives you optionality, whereas the old system forces you to be inside the walled garden. It doesn't give you choice.
Gotcha. With great power comes great responsibility, but that kind of sums it up, really, doesn't it? Because I guess especially if you're just getting started, it's so important just to put a little bit that you could afford to lose even though the market might be going crazy. And I want to come back to that in a second. But little bit amount that you could afford to lose. Maybe you've got a friend overseas and you kind of send money back and forth just to practice, really, until you get confident enough in your own abilities to secure your keys safely and to follow a procedure. I just think that's so important, because I know that actually you probably know this better than me, but how much of the crypto, like how much Bitcoin has actually gone missing, or how much is actually in circulation because of, or how much isn't in circulation because of poor management?
So there are only speculations on, how much is lost versus just has not been moved for a really long time. Because if you analyze the blockchain, which you could easily do, just there's several websites that allow you to just look at the blockchain. People use that data to try to estimate how many coins have been lost. And there's other heuristics around things that have happened in Bitcoin history that they can kind of point to try to understand what happened to certain coins. The estimates range anywhere from 6 to 3 million of the 21 million coins are lost. Wow. Which is a significant sum, right? Which means that Bitcoin already has a hard cap of what can be issued. Let's call it 21 million, but let's say potentially that's actually 18 million, or that's actually 15 million. And when you try to understand what Bitcoin could be worth in the future, it's not really super helpful to think of it in fiat terms, in dollar, in Aussie, in Kiwis or USD. If you are very bullish on Bitcoin, the way that you want to think about Bitcoin is percentage of the network, right? So how much do you have as percentage of the network? Because it's theoretically, that's the hard cap of total value that could be in the world. That's the full
So that's kind of like your shareholding, right? So it's your shareholding relative to the shares issued, right? You're kind of thinking about it in terms of a percentage. Yeah,
exactly. So if that amount is truly lost, and let's say you own 1 Bitcoin, that means you own 1/15 millionth of the entire value network. So let's put that into perspective of how many millionaires exist on the planet today. I believe it's over 40 million. So not even every millionaire in the world today can, in the long run, if Bitcoin becomes the global reserve currency, not every millionaire today can even own 1 Bitcoin. So in terms of percentage of network, that's a much better way to think of Bitcoin if you are very bullish on it and you do think that it could take over the world. Again, that probably sounds crazy to most people.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's okay to be crazy, trust me. And if you were to speculate, then so just going on to that, and there's a couple of forces at play here. We've got the what you mentioned in terms of the supply that's out there. Maybe it's 21 million hard cap, but really it's an amount maybe closer to say 17 or 18 million. So that's it's a finite supply, but it's actually shrinking. The more people are muppets with handling their keys, the more will potentially get lost. And effectively, it's less and less supply. But what are some of the other factors at play on the supply side that could push things up in terms of price?
Yeah, well, I mean, and just to kind of add on is the majority of coins were lost at the very beginning of Bitcoin. So it's never been easier to hold Bitcoin than today. And it's never been easier to not lose your coins than today, and never have fewer coins been lost than today. When Bitcoin was trading under a cent per coin and there was no software even invented to custody it, lots of coins were lost. People, there's the story of people going through buying an entire garbage landfill to try to look for a laptop that's worth, $1 billion or something like that in terms of Bitcoin that's on it. That's how little, you could actually custody it at the beginning. Today, there's, I could show you a number of specialized devices that are just on my desk that are specialized just to hold Bitcoin. And there's special schemes where you can work with a custodian. So you can it's almost like semi self-storage where you hold it and they help you with a backup or something like that. There's a lot of different ways that it has improved to not lose your Bitcoins. And I suspect that the amount of Bitcoins lost will probably not increase, much to an order of magnitude more than what it is right now.
So as the user experience gets better, then key management will become easier for the everyday person, and it's less likely that will be a factor that pushes the price up. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think this, in the second part of your question is like, what other things about Bitcoin could be bullish? And I think that this kind of brings it full circle to what I was saying about Lynn Alden mentioning that Bitcoin kind of fits into the place of a portfolio as silver. So comparing Bitcoin to silver or comparing Bitcoin to gold, there's a metric that people in the hard money community like to use called stock to flow. So stock to flow is a metric that is used to try to understand how scarce something is and how difficult something is to create, right? So in terms of, if you look at the stock to flow of silver, I think the stock to flow, and please look this up. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm just pulling this out of off the top of my head. I believe the stock to flow of silver is like, silver's is like 20, gold's is like 50, right? So it would take 50 years of gold production to dilute the entire supply. It takes only 20 years of silver production to dilute the entire supply. Right. So in terms of Bitcoin, the way that Bitcoin works is Bitcoin issuance decreases every 4 years and ultimately decreases to zero. Right. So I think by year 2140, based on the program that is, that we are all running, that we call Bitcoin, the amount of Bitcoins that are newly minted will become zero. So when Bitcoin was first created, every 10 minutes, 50 Bitcoin were created. So lots of Bitcoin was highly inflationary at the beginning. Its stock to flow was nothing, right? Like, if 50 Bitcoin existed and another 50 Bitcoin got created, that means every 10 minutes, the stock to flow doubled. Gotcha. Fast forward 12 years, the amount of Bitcoin that are being issued is now 6.25 every 10 minutes. So that is much less Bitcoin every single day and every single hour, as opposed to the entire supply that already exists, which is over 18 million have been issued so far. So yeah, that event every 4 years where the amount issued gets cut in half is called the halving. Yeah. So last April, Bitcoin's halving happened. Its third halving, and it went from 12.5 Bitcoin per every 10 minutes to 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. But effectively, the stock to flow ratio of Bitcoin went from closer to silver stock to flow, and it is now closer to gold. Right. And in the next 4 years, Bitcoin stock to flow will actually become greater than gold's. That's just one way to view Bitcoin and how to measure it compared to other assets. Yeah. But in terms of, like, if you think about it, Bitcoin has been at silver stock to flow level for 4 years. Here's Lynn Alden, a fantastic macro commentator who's just gotten back into Bitcoin, saying, hey, Bitcoin really resembles silver in your portfolio. Well, guess what? In 4 years, Bitcoin stock to flow is going to be gold stock to flow for 4 years. Maybe we're going to be saying, hey, Bitcoin's role in the portfolio is similar to gold's role in the portfolio.
And eventually better.
And then guess what? 4 years later, it's going to be double gold. So like, think about what the ceiling is on this thing is. So, I mean, if stock to flow is truly a good way to think about these things, like the ceiling on Bitcoin is just through the roof. And again, I think it's personally for me, this is my assessment based on my own research. Bitcoin is 100 to 1,000 times better than gold. Yeah. For every reason you would own gold, other than making a ring out of it or jewelry. But every other reason, every monetary reason to own gold, which is, 85% of the use case, Bitcoin's better.
We got it. So basically, the less new supply that's created, the more pressure there is to, or I guess the more resistance there is when the demand side comes on it, because there's just not enough being produced. Unlike the money printer going burr, it's finite, it's capped, it's actually decreasing. So it becomes more and more scarce relatively as you go. So demand being constant, the supply side pushes things up in terms of the price. But at the same time, flipping over to the demand side, what are we looking at here? Because I'm constantly fascinated by how people view their wealth and through the lens of dollars. Like everything that people own is denominated in dollars, fiat currency that can be manipulated, infinite supply. Yet we don't yet think in terms of relating that wealth into scarce, finite assets like gold and Bitcoin. What happens in your view? What's going to be the catalyst that really pushes the demand side through the roof.
I mean, it's impossible to know if it truly will happen, right? Governments have an enormous amount of power, and Bitcoin is still a tiny asset. But ultimately, I think what the entire world is experiencing right now is governments acting bad. And I don't think that either side of the political aisle actually disagrees with that statement. And as long as governments keep acting bad and people in power keep taking advantage of places of power and they don't have proper checks, people are going to start looking for other systems. And ultimately, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are these neutral, scarce systems that allow them to protect themselves, right? If you are, like, let's be honest, like if you are in New Zealand or you are in Australia, like the value of your currency against the US dollar is not guaranteed, right? Like you have experienced inflation against the global reserve currency, and that's against a currency that is in itself losing value, and we know that for a fact. So, like, with that reality, and as that is the only thing you can the common man stores value in, it doesn't take rocket science to say, like, wow, there could be an opportunity for the internet to do this better. The internet's already doing a lot of things better than they used to be done. Email is a protocol for sending mail. It's standardized something that was done completely analog, which is delivering mail, and email, standardized it into a protocol. Like, what if Bitcoin does that for value transfer? And what could that mean for the world? Like, that's the level that we're talking about. So, I mean, what are the percentage of that truly happening? I don't know. But, like, is there a use case for that? As long as our analog legacy systems keep having issues, I think there will be. I really do.
Just standing back and just looking at this logically, there's really only one of two possibilities in terms of the price of Bitcoin. And obviously none of this is advice for you or motivation for you to go and buy, sell Bitcoin, but there's really only two options. It's going to go down and it'll eventually be worth nothing, or it's going to go to the moon. But you can't really confidently say at this stage it'll stay the same. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I actually completely agree with that statement. I think Bitcoin has a binary outcome. It's either world reserve currency and or extremely valuable as a digital scarce resource, or it's worth nothing. So I completely agree with that statement. And in terms of like what that is going to look like from like, it's not going to stay 10,000. That's for sure. There's going to be a lot of volatility either direction.
Yeah. Do you see that volatility like in the, say, 1 to 3 year time frame? Do you see that volatility at like persisting at current levels, or do you see that it becoming a little less volatile as we kind of move up in terms of price, assuming we do move up in price?
Well, Bitcoin is getting less volatile over time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still a tiny, tiny asset, and the potential market that it is addressing is massive, orders of magnitude larger than it is. So if it does go, to that next level, it's going to be incredibly volatile on that road. But ultimately, if it does get to a stable point, it won't be volatile. It will actually be incredibly stable. Bitcoin, outside of the USD price or the fiat price, is actually, the beautiful thing about it is it's so stable. Every 10 minutes, a block is mined. It is coordinating hundreds of thousands of computers across the globe and keeping them all in sync. And it doesn't go down. 99.999% uptime since it was created. So Bitcoin is stability. What its value is to the world, that there's going to be an enormous amount of volatility.
I'm trying to stop myself from going down the rabbit hole myself here, so I'll pull it back. But
I'm sorry. I always get cosmic with this, but I hope I'm making this digestible for the audience, and I appreciate you for breaking it down yourself. You definitely do a good job.
Well, I try. Well, if nothing else, for my own benefit as well. So because again, it comes down to that point. It's either going to go crazy to the moon, or it's going to be worth zero. And I guess if you were allocating a percentage of your portfolio towards this, high risk speculative asset, sure, we can grant that.
Speculative store of value. Let's call it that.
Speculative store of value. Thank you. So if we were doing that, then it will either act as a drag to our overall wealth if it goes to zero. But if it does succeed, because it will go to the, it's asymmetric, right? It's infiniteness to what it can go to effectively. that could be one day, that could be your financial savior if we talk about really extreme circumstances, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you framed that. I brought up the term Sharpe ratio earlier, but the Sharpe ratio is this idea like you can expose 1% of risk to your portfolio to improve the value and performance of your portfolio significantly. And the way to like see this is that in 2017, if you had at the very beginning of the year, if you had allocated 1% of your portfolio to Bitcoin, by the end of 2017, that 1% was equal to the 99% that you had not allocated to Bitcoin. If you had just allocated that 99% to a standard like well-balanced portfolio of stocks and bonds. So that's what having increasing your Sharpe ratio significantly looks like in practice. So if there were to be another pump event like 2017, Bitcoin has the potential to do that to your portfolio. And truly, if you had just been allocating 1% of your portfolio to Bitcoin for the past 3 years, and that's in a bear market, you would still be in the green by a lot.
I know. Yeah,
so,
I'm testament to that. I've done that myself. That 2017 is when I started, right after the crazy hypeness, or actually I think right in the middle of the hype is when I started, and I'm still green from dollar cost averaging in over that time frame. So it's crazy because most people have kind of just said goodbye to it and not really thought about it too seriously since 2017, a good portion, and say, hey, that was truly a bubble. That's over now. Let's now look for the next bubble. But it's actually still cooking. And that was actually the third sort of bubble or the third sort of run up that we've seen since its inception.
Yeah, it was a third run up. And it's magical how well the run ups correlate with the halving events. Right, when the stock to flow increases by an order of magnitude. There is a very strong correlation there. And we just had a halving event. And what typically happens 18 months after a halving event is some craziness. So the last halving event was 2016. 2017 is what we've been referring to as what the mania that attracted both of us. And something interesting about Bitcoin, I think this is a great spot to end it, is that Bitcoin is so transparent and is so auditable that we actually know exactly what percentage of Bitcoins are in profit right now. So Bitcoin allows such granular assessment of the entire chain that you can understand when a coin was transferred or minted, and how long it's been sitting. And if you cross analyze when like the date in which every coin that is in existence right now was last transferred, you can make an assessment of what was the price at that transfer date. And then you can see what percentage of coins are in profit. And it's like over 90% of coins are in profit right now. So like, just try to understand this. Like, we're 3 years off the all-time high. We've been grinding down, and 90% of holders are in profit. So like, amazing. I just think this thing is incredibly bullish, and the macro atmosphere has never been better. There's never been more high quality cheerleaders. Let me just read a list. Paul Tudor Jones, the famous macro investor, just put a significant position, the max position he could take at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME. Raoul Paul, the head of Real Vision, which is a fantastic macro commentary site, is creating a crypto exclusive version just because he's so bullish. Dan Tapiero, famous gold investor, is incredibly bullish. Preston Pish, famous commentator, has been completely obsessed with Bitcoin. Lynn Alden, who we've mentioned many times, the founder of Square and Twitter, Jack Dorsey, only has one word in his Twitter bio, and it's #Bitcoin. There's never been more macro forces and social forces and political forces in Bitcoin's favor. And I mean, it's just insane to watch this happen in real time.
Yeah. When everyone else is doing it, maybe we should have a look at it, right? Or ideally before everyone else is doing it.
I mean, it's not going away. So if you think you can just sleep this one out, I don't think you're going to be too happy with the end result.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, really appreciate your time, CK. Thanks for coming on the show today. And if people want to follow you, you mentioned your Twitter handle at the start of the show. Can you just mention your Twitter handle again?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at CK_snarks. You can also find me at Bitcoin Magazine. I do a show there called Fed Watch, which is the Bitcoin and macro podcast. Fantastic podcast. Have a lot of the people that we mentioned in this show appear on that show. So already a great library there. And yeah, a lot of good content there at Bitcoin Magazine.
Awesome. Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Christian. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on.
No worries. All right. Thank you. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that show. Now, again, a warning that today's discussion revolved around a highly speculative alternative asset. Investing in Bitcoin could result in you losing all your money. So please do proceed with caution. Now, for our New Zealand and our Australian audience, if you've done some due diligence and you are ready to make a move here into crypto and into Bitcoin in particular, you are naturally probably thinking, well, where do I go to buy Bitcoin? Am I just going to rock up to my bank and get laughed at trying to ask for a deposit in crypto? No. So I'm going to suggest to you that you check out Easy Crypto. Now, we've had them on the show before, highly rate them, fantastic service. And if you'd like to support the NZ Everyday Investor in some way, click on the affiliate link in the description to go through to Easy Crypto and set up an account with them now. They're basically just an online crypto retailer. They don't hold it for you. That's just a means to buy that asset. A link is in the description to click on. Check them out. The team there do an awesome job, and they provide a ton of resources to get you started in your Bitcoin journey. That's it for me. We'll catch you next time around.